society is designed in a specific way by an entity. You all know who the entity is. He's the same one who was on the scene with Adam and Eve. And back then, he could not touch them. He couldn't even touch Job, but he was given permission. He touched all of whom he could get through, but he could not touch those who belonged to the living God. Funny thing, he couldn't do it. Anyway, now he really can't do it because of the blood. But Satan sets up society in such a way that he puts us in a prison we cannot escape. You hear a lot of people, they bolster exactly what these controllers want to be bolstered, like Ancestry.com, making you proud of your heritage. If you're proud of your heritage, you're going to adopt a brand new set of characteristics. You're going to emulate those of whom you think you have come from. Some of you may say, well, that's not too bad. Well, if you're a believer, it's terrible. Simple answer. Believers are supposed to be born again. So if you're spiritually born again, to be born again means what was previous to that point is dead, or else you're not born again. There's a truth in the Word of God, and then there's something that we do, thinking that we're the new creature. Listen, if the old creature is still alive, there is no new creature. There can only be a new creature if the old creature is dead. And to be born again, that means everything is different. When you're born again, whatever existed previously has to have died. Or how then can you be born again? That's why Jesus told Nicodemus, you're not far from the kingdom of God. And he told him because he didn't understand, well, what is it to be born again? Spiritually being born again means what drove you prior to that time is dead. If it's not dead, then you have the promise of being born again. But you're the one keeping alive that old spirit, which is called the old man. Because none of us jump into the graveyard, bury ourselves, and say, well, I died to myself. No, not that type of death. Spiritually dead. That means your heart's desire prior to being a believer was to get money, to be a country singer, whatever the case was. That's what you wanted. When you're born again, you have a brand new set of desires. You belong to a brand new family. You don't belong to the old family anymore. So what does Satan do? Satan says, nope, I can't have people running around believing what's true. I must have them believe in a lie. So what did he do? As soon as you're born again, he sends agents out, spiritual agents in the church, agents that you cannot see, agents that you cannot speak to. And what they do is they begin to tamper with the idea of being born again. And so they come up with things like ancestry. You guys remember when the prosperity message started to break down, right? As soon as it started to break down, guess what people started doing? All of a sudden there was an interest in genealogy. You guys remember that? And of all the customers they've ever had, Christians were the ones because they wanted to be associated with something holy, and they were so curious. Due to a loss of identification, they went to Ancestry.com to see where they came from, denying their born-again title, right, that the Lord gave them. You're born again. They just totally threw that one to the back window and said, let me search out my genealogy. Even to this day, there's a confusing point because people will say, well, I have Jewish blood and I have this, that, and the other. Well, according to the Lord, that does not matter. You see what Satan does? So when the prosperity message broke down, because what does this prosperity message actually do? The prosperity message actually has you to think up things that are in the world. It keeps you grounded in the world. It will not allow you to die to your flesh. In fact, it bolsters and strengthens your flesh. It strengthens the resolve of flesh. It gives your flesh an identity. Money can give you power. Power, during the time of the prosperity message, that's when man began to create all these electronic devices. And the kids said, ooh, I want that, this, and I want that, and I want that thing that lights up, because when I was small, we went from the toys that were made out of tin to the plastic toys with electronics in them. And as soon as that hit, the music industry just took off. And then the entertainment industry, because that's also when cable came out a little later after that, it took off. which it could reach more people throughout advertising. Movies were a big deal. And people went from actually sitting in the house talking and reading to watching television all the time, to making sure everybody was home at a specific time to watch, the black and white television. So we went from that to all this neat stuff that we have full of colors, right? Just information overload. It looked like it had promise. These toys are unusual toys. These devices are unusual in this respect. These devices that we use even today, when they first started out, there was a plan involved with them, a spiritual plan that has worked, and it's working to this very day. During that prosperity time, people knew for a fact that with money you were empowered. Everybody was concerned about being rich, and everybody had a dream about being rich. That was on the tail end of the Great Depression, the tail end of wars, the tail end of the Vietnam War, the tail end of quite a few things. And then all of a sudden everything shifted. Everything became entertainment. Everything became movies and entertainment. And all of a sudden you had a group of children who were introduced into mass media, and all of them wanted to be what? Famous. They sowed an idea into people for two things. You ready? Everybody wanted to be known and celebrated, and they knew that would take money. That's also when the crime rate related to money schemes and things like that just took off. It skyrocketed. That's also the time when people would kill themselves because nobody would acknowledge them, kind of like what they do today. Then it was in the church. The target was the church, because if the church could be lured in to believe part of this prosperity message, they would not ever call out the spirits that were working outside of them in the world. Why do you think Satan is so interested in deceiving the church? If the church is deceived, the church will never look out of the church and say, these spirits are wrecking families. Let's stand together in prayer. But they did not pray against it. They joined in with it. Thus, they made themselves powerless against it. And it crept in. You remember all the ministers that publicly were having affairs, publicly drinking, doing things you wouldn't believe. They were living in sin, but because of money, they felt that they could get away with it. That false sense of security. See, money during that time was a prayer answered, wasn't it? In fact, wasn't that one of the key messages during tithe time? You give tithe so that the Lord will give you twice as much money back. They were making it all about money. And as the church was so inwardly trying to get their hands on all the money they could, and had the congregation hoping that God would just open up the windows of money heaven down to them, something was happening in the world, something that hardly anybody can notice now, and certainly hardly anybody can escape now. And just about all of us have been touched by it. And anyone who breaks free of it, they truly are somewhat alone. Because if it cannot be recognized, then how can you tell someone to escape? Would you tell a person who is absolutely free to escape? They would be confused. So if they can't recognize it, you can't tell them. They'll have no context for it. You'll speak, it'll certainly be in vain, because they will not comprehend it. Satan has done to a large degree. He's done that very thing right now. Whatever you endeavor to do for the sake of the Father, and you do it out of love for another person, the Lord will enhance everything you're trying to do. He'll ensure that you can accomplish all those things He said to put your hand forth and accomplish. He will ensure that they're done. That means if you have to have mental enhancements, so be it. If you have to have an ability, so be it. If you have to have a set of gifts, so be it. But if you do that for the sake of love, for the right reasons, which means that other person is made in the image and likeness of the Creator. You're not thinking about Zechariah Ascension and all this other nonsense, but you really regard that person as a rare individual. And you can wipe all hate from your mind, which is to wipe yourself from your own life. Focus on the other person, you'll see everything. The truth is this, folks. Some of you would say evil is rising in the world, right? I would say evil is not rising in the world. Not literally. You know what's happening? You're finally beginning to see what was there all the time. That's what's happening. And when you see it, you start turning your head from it. When you see it, it's very distasteful, because you believed what you saw in front of you, but you could not see what was hidden. Now, those things that were hidden are starting to be seen. You find it distasteful. It's nothing new. It was only something unseen. It was always at work it was just unseen. We began as flesh. We are flesh right now. We're being spiritually raised. We're dying to the flesh daily on a daily basis. Something of our flesh is being exposed by the living God. And through that exposure, we're given a choice to put that down or to keep it. Therefore, we're dying to flesh daily. It's a process. So why would I ever expect flesh to be like a saint? I don't live my life by imaginations. I try to live it by truth, which means the truth of you is who is here today. The truth of you is what you have stood up from. The truth of you is where you are. And today, you're not that bank robber. Today, you're not that person who did what you did. Today, you're not the murderer. Today, you're not the thief. Today, you're not the this, that, and the other. Today is your opportunity. See, our Father sees us the same way. He sees the truth of all of us. So how in the world can he look at us in the first place? We know what we have done. We know what's in our hearts. We know we still hate what he loves the most, which is our fellow man. How can he even look at us? We must be filth bags to him. But he looks at us with love and love only. He commanded his love towards us, that he gave his only begotten Son. Did you hear that? He commanded his love towards us. You know what a command of God means? He will not turn away from it. If he commanded his own love, he will feel no other way. That's why people should never ever say, well, I think God is mad at me. No, he isn't. He loves you. He commanded his love towards us. So even he can feel nothing else but love for us. Nowhere else in the Bible will you hear of the living God commanding of himself that type of love, save for humanity. He commanded his love towards us. That means we are not receiving his hatred. We're receiving his love, and he will not have it any other way. Not only did he command his love towards us, sending his Son, but his Son has the task of constantly working with us. See, one day, I thought it impossible to stop sinning. Lord, how can somebody just stop sinning? That's what I thought. That is so hard to maintain this standard, because when you think of Christian, when you're young, you're like, oh, I got to go to church every Sunday. Got to go to do this prayer meeting. Got to read the Bible. Got to keep this standard, keep that standard, keep all this. It's impossible, because nothing in you wanted to do that. And then one day, after thinking that Christianity was some burdensome task, the Lord changed all of that. See, I found out that when the Lord opens your eyes to yourself, which would be the worst time in your life, when you actually see who you really are, you lose your desire to sin. In other words, you don't have any desire to sin left. You're so broken by what he shows you. And then he will cause you to understand that he died for the real you. Not the you that you present to everybody, but the real one. The one that did all the stuff, that felt all those things you didn't share with a soul. He died for you. Then when a person admits their own sin, their own guilt and all this other stuff, that's when the Lord opens your eyes to his Son. And one of the first thoughts you'll have is, why did you die for me? I'm so dirty. Because you'll realize your own dirt. And you'll say, why me? And when you do that, when you start to realize that, it's when you see the cross in a brand new light. When you see the Lord and the agony he went through, and then you realize that he went through that agony for a long time in your life for nothing. In other words, while I was young, sinning and everything, he was on the cross in pain. Through my arrogance, through many other things, Christ was crucified so that I would never be guilty of those things. And when that hits you to the heart that he suffered, whenever I get sick, if I get wounded, I don't complain. There's a reason why. As soon as I'm wounded, as soon as I'm sick, if the worst pain I've ever felt, I think of Christ and what he went through for people who didn't want to believe that he was the Messiah. He died for him anyway. Folks who scoffed him, the folks who put him to death, the folks who resisted him, the folks who sat out there and sinned and everything else knowing they were not built for it, the folks who believed the lie more than the truth. He died for them anyway. Can you die for somebody when they're not even paying attention? And then when you realize that part, wait a minute, whoa, that changes everything. That he died for all of us, even when we weren't paying, even when we didn't care, we didn't even really take thought of who he really was, yet he died anyway. What great love is that? All this time, the Father was mindful of us, but we were only mindful of the thing he hates the most, which is iniquity. So we had become the very thing he hates the most, but because of his own love, he gave it all to bring us back home. And when that hits you in the heart, that desire to sin, you want to go out there, you want to join in with this group and do this, or go hang out with the fellas and do that, it dies. It becomes an abomination to you, and you'll never turn back to it, because once you understand what Christ actually did, and then you understand yourself and how distant you were from his righteousness, and that you were the worst person. Judas Iscariot has nothing on me. People talk about the betrayal of Judas. He did that right to the face of Christ. It's worse to do it behind his back. When you realize that, you'll have no desire to sin. God's word is his heart, and he put it to death because it deemed us guilty. So he nailed it to the cross. He had men nail it to the cross. Then he gave us a new word with a new promise, with an inheritance. So when I see somebody else, if they have darkness in their lives, there's no way they can be worse than me. I am the worst person I have ever met in my life. I will always be the worst person I ever met in my life, and no one will ever come close to topping that. So I can always forgive another, and I'll always stand with the Lord. I desire them to have life and for them to make it. There's no way I could ever desire for any human being not to make it. Because if I did that, my heart would be against the Most High. Humanity is alive right now at this moment, and things are being held back for that very reason. Because there's still some coming in. When you love your neighbor that much, the Lord will not withhold from you things you've always wanted to know. With maturity, you'll have his word, and there won't be any more mysteries. Connecting that back to what I said previously, though, whatever we go through in life is fashioned for our lives. If it was not necessary for us to go through, we would not through it. I already know that many don't understand this because they're trying to understand by way of flesh. The Lord never did anything to strengthen my flesh above my spirit. He even said, I would that you prosper as your soul prospers. The soul can only prosper by the gaining of spirit. Now, technology. What's the big deal about technology in the first place? Well, we discussed prosperity, that era of prosperity, and what they were giving to everybody. Trying to have people empowered by money is what they put the focus to. There's nothing wrong with being prosperous. Here's the problem. The problem with what they were preaching back then was that they told people, they just flat out told them, if God blesses you with money, that's when you're going to smile. No, they were teaching it backwards. They were teaching people that if you get money, then you're blessed. That's what they were teaching. That's wrong. A blessing has nothing to do with money. A blessing is just like wisdom from above. It is without regret. That's why the Lord said, don't store up your treasure on earth where moths can eat it and rust can get to it. So we know that's tangible things. And if he told us not to store up our treasure on earth, then we know the most valuable things are spiritual. But they're teaching what these old ones teach, what Beelzebub taught a long time ago, the era of Balaam, who taught Balak something very specific. If you have money, you're empowered. If you have money, then you're a person. If you have money, you have status, and that status is going to determine everything of your life. This is what they teach in the world. Do they not? What do you think? Nobody wants to be called a person of the poor class. They don't mind being called middle class. They would love to be the rich. You know what's so funny? So many people speak against the rich, yet they themselves are doing everything to get rich. That's simple jealousy speech. That's what the world teaches. And what is wrong with that? Ladies and gentlemen, money does not empower you. Money empowers the flesh. All of us should have desire for our fellow man to make it. Don't have the mindset of Lucifer. Lucifer is the one that does not want us to make it. So don't put yourself in that camp. For some ministers, it is necessary for them to have millions. For others, it is not necessary. Yes, some have gotten it themselves, but let the Lord be the judge of them. Don't put yourself in a seat of judging. Now, that same prosperity message shifted that word blessing from coming directly from the living God to us by many means to people making money equal a blessing. And when people thought money equaled a blessing, let me tell you what they did. They would look at you and your lifestyle, and you guys know this, because they would say, oh, your car's broke down, you must not be blessed. Oh, your house needs work, you must not be blessed. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about because you heard the same speech and you had the same sensations. status. That if you had a nice outfit on, that if your car was shiny and your house was good, they would say you're blessed. But if you didn't have that, they would not say you were blessed. And you felt like you would be looked upon in a strange way. You didn't fit in. The same social behavior founded in the world came into the church through that prosperity message. And so what it did was it took people away from fighting the spirits that were running rampant in the earth. And they continued. They built up and they got stronger. In the earth, they got stronger. And as they got stronger in the earth, they went to entertainment. Now remember, first, the message was the empowerment by money. Satan never wants you to understand that having relationship with the Lord is where you want to be. That he is not distant, he's not 2 million miles away from you. That your relationship can be had right there where you are. And to have that relationship is to be blessed. People lack because of a lack of understanding in that very area. As a man thinketh, so is he. That's a principle. So, of course, Satan wants you to think you're in a darkness yourself. Satan always wants you to think you're in darkness, because if you think you're in darkness, you'll never go beyond it. But the moment you believe the truth, which is you're a child of the Most High, and all things, the earth therein, is his, though these kingdoms are run by satanic forces, everything belongs to the living God, and all things exist within him, and that we're in his process, and that Satan does not want you to ever think of yourself being in a process, because that means it's not permanent. And if it's not permanent, then you would start rejoicing, because you know that no season lasts forever. He didn't want you to do that. He wants you to think that if you're in a mess, that's how it's going to be for the rest of your life. No, it isn't. That's training. You put a person in a mess in training so that person can learn how to never fall in that situation again. People even fall. They get tripped up in training. Why? Most people miss the main point. Of all the things you've been through, nothing took you out of here. You still continue. Through everything in your life, nothing took you out of here. And guess what? You still believe in Christ. How's that possible? Because Satan has no power over your life. Because Christ is over your life. He is the one that limits you physically, so you won't corrupt yourself spiritually. If some of you were not physically limited, you would have been corrupted a long time ago. In fact, all you have to do is look back in your life and you'll say, yep, I was corrupted, and it was getting worse. And then things started falling apart and gravity started working and my looks changed and I messed myself up. And all of a sudden I didn't have this problem anymore because I was corrupted. The Lord killed that corruption, didn't he? And if you're young, he will destroy the corruption out of your life because he loves you. You may first see it as a loss. You may see it even sometimes as a curse. But it's not that. He made that portion of you that was helping to corrupt you because you couldn't stop it on your own. He took it. He broke it down. He plucked it away. And now it cannot be utilized to corrupt you anymore, nor can it tempt you. It's like if you had a car, and every time you got in that car, you collected speeding tickets, and your speeding tickets were hurting other people too. What do you think the Lord would do? If I was in that position, and every time you got behind anything you could drive, you got a speeding ticket which was taken away from your own children, those you loved, which was corrupting you even more, made you feel invincible, I'd cause you a blindness. You'd never drive again. By whatever means you were driving and corrupting yourself, that would be the very thing I would destroy out of your life, to save your life. The Lord is not cursing you. He's saving you. Can't you see that? He's saving your life. If your life would have ended back then, you would not be spiritually in the place you need to be so that you can go home with him. He is securing you spiritually. And listen to me, he'll do it at all costs. Hope you hear that. That means if your legs have to go, so be it. If your arms have to go, so be it. If your head has to go, if that were possible, so be it. So long as your soul is saved. Do you understand? Because see, to our Father, who would put his own word or his son to death to save us, he's serious about your salvation. He's serious about you coming all the way home. It also means he's a good father, and he's not going to stop until it's all over. That's why Satan tries so incredibly hard to distort most biblical principles. What did electronics do to us real quick? Because I know I'm blabbing. The same way that money was utilized to make a person feel empowered back then inside the believers' groups, right? Do you know electronics does the same thing, even down to your cell phone? Now listen to me, everybody. When you don't have a telephone, guess what you feel like? You feel like an outcast, like you're not part of society, like you just lost all of your best friends. You don't have an identity. You feel like a no one, being cut off from the world. But when you have electronics, a cell phone, guess what? You are empowered. It's not to say that you know a lot of people, but you're empowered now. You have the same power that somebody else has. You have that same potential. Satan is doing something real tricky, but I'm about to go a step further. I want you guys to get this, and then we'll stop. And because I'm not done with electronics, he took electronics one step forward with computers. The cell phone, when you don't have it, you feel cut off from society. You feel like a no one. Most people get depressed and everything else they do. It's the strangest thing, isn't it? But when you have one, you look at the cell phone and you feel empowered. You have a potential to do a whole lot. Now that potential is power. It's a potential power. That potential. When you have a computer, then you also get the false sense that you can do just about anything. You have a dream in front of you with that computer. It's the funniest thing. It's so funny because people will get a computer and they'll get happy. But why though? Because the world is constantly telling you about what they have associated richness with what people do on the internet, causing other people to believe that they too can get rich. Well, they can get rich, but we all know everybody's not going to get rich from the internet. But to have that potential, that means everything to a person. So Satan has shifted his ideology. The money thing didn't work out too well. And remember, you're the target. The world he already has, he does not have you. So the prosperity thing, it kind of fizzled out. But with the technology thing, he did something totally different. First, he tried to empower you with money. Now he's trying to empower you with knowledge. If you lost your hard drive in your computer, for many of you, that means many, many years of your brain would be gone too, of your memories would be gone too. It has become precious. It has become something that you have that enhances you. And without that enhancement, you wouldn't be any good to anybody. You'd be right back in depression or something. So now he's made a device that attaches to your identity. Without a computer, you feel limited in what you can do in this world that we live in. With the computer, you feel empowered. You feel secure. Some people can get a computer and never do a thing on it, but they must have it just in case. See that just in case clause? What do you need a computer for? Well, just in case. But you'll find something to do with it. Social media and all these things, why would that be inspired? Now listen, we live in an existence where nothing is an accident. So why the social media stuff? To keep the ideologies alive. That's why. You guys don't know this, but everybody's looking for some inanimate thing to gain life. Listen to this one. When you're not connected to social media, you feel left out, don't you? I remember one time, because it was about 20 years ago, with social media, it gave you this strange feeling. Yeah, it was a tool. Yes, you could, but I saw the potential in it. Then I began to notice how international barriers broke down, how one person would compare their lives to another, and the suicide rate went up. And it was because when the internet came out, when social media came out, we were no longer the United States of America. That exists in the real world, but in the computer world, there's no such thing as the USA. Because all the borders have been taken down, all the limitations taken out. And now people can compare how they're living, religions and everything else. So what spawned? Knowledge. Everybody was hard-pressed to get knowledge of everybody else, and that became a commodity. It's a commodity right now, knowledge is. And so then most of the people who were involved in the church began to use computers to do research. You hear that term all the time, research, research, research. Everybody is giving themselves a job to research. They have to research. Well, I can't do that right now. I got to research. Well, I can't do this because I have to research. So it's all research to amass knowledge, to look up all these written articles, to look up everything else. And then when a person gets all that research on the computer, after they research for, say, like 5 years, they write a 2-paragraph finding thing, right? They'll do all that research, and they'll feel like they cannot abandon it. Now they have invested in the computer, and because they've invested in the computer, and what I mean by that, they put time into it, they put sweat into it, they've had discoveries with it, they've had good times with it, they've shared moments with it. Now they won't part from it. You start developing that type of connection with anything, and you'll never part from it. now that they won't part from it, now that they'll always have to have one. It's not easy to give up on a phone or a computer. It's not easy to do it. I've seen people that live in the middle of nowhere, but they have a computer and their cell phone. What in the world? They'll say, I'm disconnected from society. I'm not part of society. I'm not living out there with those crazy people. Yeah, but you bring the crazy people right into your place with your computer and your cell phone, so that doesn't work, right? To be remote no longer works because you don't have to. You can experience the world through this window called a computer, and you can see everything. So the bragging rights saying, I'm not a part of society anymore. I don't do that. I'm doing it the hardcore way. That doesn't work because you still have a cell phone and a computer. You still have a window. You're right. That's like staying indoors. You know, that's like me moving to New York City saying, guys, I'm leaving the city. But in truth, I just never leave the apartment. Are you kidding? That's not leaving the city. I still have a window, right? So anyway, it's hard to part a person from a computer because now society, at first it was just a thing. Then it turned into a college thing. Now it's a worldwide thing, the internet. And now it's almost required. And since it has become a piece of society, you'll think you're missing something without it. Meaning the computer has become the empowerment for many different reasons. So when a person gets a computer, they feel like they're part of society again. And without a computer, they know they can't buy or sell or do anything else. They can't do it. They can't research. They're handicapped. They can't live in this modern day without a computer or without a cell phone. It's already taking place. But the empowerment it has in your life is for it can take up all your time. Think about this. One time I sat down to look at something on the computer. First, I went to a site. I began to read, which led me to another site. I began to read, which led me to a video, which led me to YouTube. YouTube led me to 15, 16 more YouTubes. Before I knew it, the whole day was gone. And I sat back after that because I didn't accomplish too much. I said, oh my Lord, are you kidding? This computer just robbed me of a whole day. And the justification was what? Because I was a person used to, production. So what did I produce? Nothing. I learned some things. That was it. So a computer can have you look away from the Bible and tie your time up in videos for hours, and we never complain. I said, nope, not again. That's not going to happen again. It's taking away my production time. And do you not know that 78% of a person's day is consumed by doing nothing? But it's not so easy to part with, and people will angrily justify their time with a computer even when they're not doing it. They'll do it with anger and justify their time with a computer. They'll justify a need to have a computer. And what do they end up doing? Here it is. Those who spend a lot of time with computers that don't have that spiritual discipline will normally be drawn into things that reside on the internet that will destroy your spirit eventually. In other words, you're going to be drawn to porn sites. You're going to be drawn to this, that, and the other. Draw you right in there. If you're not careful, you're going to be drawn into gossip. You're going to be drawn into everything the Lord said don't become a part of. So what I'm telling you now, we were better off with the prosperity stuff because now they're consuming people. These electronics bait a person, giving them a false potential like they can achieve anything. And it's such a world of discovery in this thing, so much potential. The problem is it is misdirected potential. And a person gets in there, they develop a relationship and indeed a need for the computer because they store pictures and information. They have invested time, sweat, and everything else in there. So they'll tell everybody else, nope, I've done a lot of work. I need that computer because that computer can do this, that, and the other. But the more they stay on it, the more the temptation exists to go into things they shouldn't go into. And one place leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another, which can tie up all of your time. And then you end up doing something where it's almost like addictive behavior. And in all that time, you're not even thinking about opening up the Bible. But what I'm telling you is it's a tool that looks innocent, doesn't really do anything, but it can cause, it opens up a world of temptation to those who are not spiritually grounded. And they're always pushing and pushing and pushing. But now what's worse than anything else is that each of us has a justified need for it. So we could easily slip in these days more than we ever could in the old days. And for most people, ladies and gentlemen, they've crossed the line and it's very difficult to bring them back. You know, it's also changed your brain chemistry. That's a proven fact. It's already changed your brain chemistry. It has already changed any child who was born in 2020, their brain chemistry, whether their parents saw a computer or not, their brain chemistry is different. They're being altered already. By what? By the introduction of something that almost, well, I can't get into the details, but let's just say that when you're looking at a screen or something like that, you're looking at millions of things per second is what you're seeing. And it alters things. It changes your visual acuity reaction time. It can also change your taste buds, what you desire, cravings, all sorts of things are now, kind of tied to this thing. And there is indeed a demand that children have for electronics now. You know what the next step is. The next step is immersion, total immersion into this world. And that's going to make even closer points to this stuff. But in all the time we put into computers, with all the research and everything else, the Bible says those who belong to the beast system, they don't sleep too good. And you know what people today, one of the number one things they don't do is sleep. They don't sleep because they have things to do. Now that the computer's in the home, everybody has something to do. We get to a point where we won't have to sleep. They've already got the drug. It's been FDA approved and everything. It can allow you to stay up for at least 200 hours with no adverse effects. Psychologically, they were testing children last year before the coronavirus. They took away all electronic devices from the classroom, and it seemed like the kids couldn't even function right. The kids had no idea. They weren't really utilizing the computers for any tests. They just took them out of the classroom. These students were involved in a series of tests. They did it in such a way that the student wouldn't have an idea of what tests they were taking because of the nature of the questions. You take away electronics, it's almost like you just took away their best friend. Now they have humanity physiologically connected to electronics. That is a truth. It's about to go another step further. All this has happened without us saying a word. Think about it.